Okay, well, it's another day in the shop, and we find ourselves today finally getting around to working on the 80-inch. Now, this 80-inch is a 1951 Land Rover, and that means it's a lights through the grill. It was the one year that they did that. This is a very early car in that year, so it still has a 1.6 liter engine in it. They didn't go to the 2 until a little bit later in 51, and this has the original Land Rover Series 1 steering box in it, or it had the original Land Rover Series 1 steering box in it. We have one of the steering boxes that was done by the Land Rover Classics Reborn division. So this is a brand new, like 2020 Land Rover Series 1 steering box. The last time they made these was like, you know, in the 1950s. So it's really cool to have such a neat original part that is in fact a factory replacement part. And today we're gonna go through, it's already in the car, so we swapped out the old box and we put in the new box. And today we're gonna go through putting all the little bits and bobs onto the down tube that gives you the ability to use the horn. It also does all the sealing work to make sure that all of the lubricant stays inside of the steering box and not in a puddle on the floor, or at least not quite as big of a puddle on the floor. So we're gonna get to it. Chris, who doesn't listen to the show, is gonna give me a hand today, so let's crack on. All right, well, first job is going to be removing this little guy right at the bottom here. There's just 2 bolts that take him off. What that allows us to do is get into the inside of the box so we can run the steering tube, which actually runs down the inside of the steering wheel here. We're also gonna put a new steering wheel into this car. It's not the greatest 80-inch steering wheel in the world. It's just pretty good. It was restored, but it wasn't actually recast. It was just a good original casting that sort of got repainted and stuff, which I don't love, but because it's going to get leather wrapped around the outside, I really do like that on a classic Land Rover, especially when you drive them a lot and you drive them a good distance. It's nice to have the leather wrap on the steering wheel because it gives you a little bit better contact with the wheel and makes it a little bit easier to drive without, obviously, no power steering. The power steering is whatever you had for breakfast, so you can really muscle into it. But anyway, so we're gonna get to that. We'll pull this old steering wheel off, put the new steering wheel on, and then run everything inside, do all the little bits and bobs, seal it up, and pull it full of 90 weight and see what we get. So here we go. New steering wheel, so we've got all the important bits and bobs. This is actually for a Series 2A, so we won't be putting that back on. But the steering wheel itself is the same, and so first job is to pull off the old steering wheel, which there's one little bolt right here that has to come out. That's a Whitworth bolt, so that's gonna come out, and I may go to my Whitworth hardware bin, as I have a bunch of new Sharadized fasteners that I'm slowly replacing all of the fasteners on any of the cars here with these new fasteners. I've also got to make sure that that I've straightened the wheels on this car because, you know, once we go back, this steering wheel wants to be centered, and we want the bolt to be at the bottom. Right now, this is just stuck on so that I can move it in and out of the workshop, but what we want to do is actually have this come off and have the new one come on and have it be centered so that the bottom spokes here are at the top. These are, I'm sorry, the top spokes are at the top, and the bottom spoke faces down. That's sort of how it should be. So that's what we're gonna do. All right, there we go. All right, so that's the bolt out of this steering wheel. A couple washers in there. Now we're going to pull this thing out of the car, which is always various feats of strength. We just pull it. It's just a little, actually this one should come off easy. Yeah, this comes off easy because this one wasn't really in there like home run. Plus, I put enough copper grease on there. This looks like a geriatric situation here. Here, so I'm gonna put it on just like this for now.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so now we've got the steering up in the air. We've got the front wheels lifted off the ground. We've got the bumper just lifted up with the floor jack. So now we have to make sure that the wheels are straight, and that way we can center the steering wheel. All right, so I'm gonna get this in here. There's a washer that goes on each side. Now, on the actual shaft of the steering column here, this threaded, this splined piece, there's actually a little detent for where the bolt goes through, and that sets this depth. There's a little spring in here that kind of sets this tension of this wheel so that it doesn't wobble back and forth and things on this bolt. And you have to kind of get this in and then get it to just the right sort of spot, and it will pop through, just like that. Go ahead and put this Whitworth Sheridized hardware back on. This Sheridizing looks like it might need a refresh at some point soon, but it'll work for now. And I get the very careful combination of things in here that let me get this guy back together. Don't want this coming off. There we go. Feels about right, and that prevents the steering wheel from coming back and forth. So even if this bolt were to loosen out, the combination of the spring tension in this collar and the fact that there's a detent that it's actually running through in here will keep it, relatively put together. Like I said, I'm gonna leather wrap this wheel. It's just been painted, and it's not the best paint job in the world, and it's also, the molding isn't absolutely perfect. It's actually not too bad, and this centerpiece isn't too bad, all things considered. Everything is round and straight, which is the nicest thing about it. So I do like a leather wrap on these series steering wheels. So we're gonna do it. All right, so this is the stator tube that runs down the inside of the steering shaft. And basically, there are a number of little bushings and bits and bobs that need to go on here to make sure that it leaks less. I mean, it doesn't ever leak zero. So we got the parts manual out here so that we can figure out all of our wonderful little parts from our good friends Rob and Alex at CKD Shop in the UK. If you have shitty old Series 1 Land Rovers, Alex and Rob are your lads when it comes to finding these very rare parts, and all this rubber is reproduction and stuff. There's no original stuff left. It would be disintegrated into dirt by now. So we start with this little felt bush. This goes up in the top and actually rides sort of right in the steering column area, and I don't know, I guess prevents, like, I don't know, gases or something from escaping. I don't really know what it does. And then we've got this little bushing down here. This is what enters into the steering box sort of case itself. This is a little seal that goes on the outside plate, and it's actually tapered to fit into that plate. And then this is the little plug at the end. It's a little grommet that the wires actually poke through, and then this is the wire loom that ultimately has to kind of breach this little thing and go out and get plugged in to allow the horn to operate. And this is an original Bakelite horn, and then reproduction parts inside of it that are still that still work. And this horn, when plugged in, functions perfectly. This is the original stator tube because it's brass soldered and everything. Very cool stuff. Let's go throw it in. Going out the other end now. Piece that I needed is removable rings. So then this guy is going to go on right here. It's up very snugly. In fact, it might have to be spread a little bit because this is actually the thing that captures it. So I might have to spread this just a tiny. Oh yeah, it's closed and it's painted closed. So all right, so I'm gonna put this on the anvil part of my vise. Now I have a bunch of chisels and things, but honestly, this needs such a small adjustment, and it happens to be brass, that this will work just fine. Alright, so it's got a little split in it. That's probably enough, but because it gets bolted closed again, it really doesn't hurt to just split it open a little bit more. I'm using a nice soft screwdriver so I'm not destroying the part. That looks pretty good. This is the Most fun job in the world. Putting this thing back together. Love shoving the wires in there when they don't want to go at all. Okay. Now, without causing any sparking, when you hook the battery back up, and
Sure can. That I can do.
we'll test the lights and we'll test the horn. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and switch the main lights on. Hey, there's lights. All right, I'm gonna dip them. Boop. 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 All right, ready for the horn? Okay, last up. Now we're going to put a little bit of 90 weight into the steering box so that it will lubricate and steer properly. So you got to take this little bung off the top here. There we go. Take it with this cool little 1/2-inch drive socket so that it's you know, a little easier to take off. And there's a little plug. And then we'll just put some fluid right in here. We use 90 weight, synthetic 80 W90 weight from Lucas. That is really a good lubricant for a vehicle of this vintage. It's meant to deal with sort of old stuff. Now this steering box is brand new, so it doesn't really need any kind of fancy old car stuff, but it does have it, and it's gonna be great. So I'm gonna button a few little things up, and I'm gonna throw the doors on, and then we can go and do a little test drive and see if this new steering box is really as good as everyone says it's supposed to be. So I'm gonna leave the fender and the hood off for now because I might have to get in there, I might have to adjust things, and so it's just easier. We'll just keep the fender off for now and take it for a little spin. So let's do it. That's a nice steering. Fast, but it is lighty. And there we go, back in the workshop. Put the fender back on. Maybe I'll let the exhaust cool off a little bit, but put the fender back on, and that'll sort of be it. Then this car will be back in action, and man, it steers like a dream. Really great car. And yeah, much more content on this to come of that, I'm sure. So if you enjoyed this running about in the Series 1 Land Rover, then hey, like and subscribe, because that's the only way that we can make more of this content. So hey, there's all kinds of other stuff to check out on the channel. If you haven't looked at some of our Tales from the Trails videos or some of our workshop tutorials or tool tip-top tool tips, it's a great time to go check it out. You know, why not? We'll put it in these little, you know, these things or the boxes or whatever. We'll put it somewhere so you'll be able to see it. But until then, we'll see you on the trail.